we will also be moving an amendment, and we would support Deputy Pringle's amendment, but we would also, and to make it clear, our amendment is additional to the government's, so it's not it doesn't require deleting anything that's in the government's, but it adds to it specifically a condemnation of NATO's role in escalating the war and increasing militarisation in Europe, and it calls for a reassertion of Irish neutrality and a commitment that we won't be joining NATO. So, People Before Profit shares absolutely the outright, unequivocal, unconditional, as we have from the beginning, condemnation of Vladimir Putin's brutal and unjustifiable war. He has rained down death and destruction and misery on hundreds of thousands, millions indeed, millions of people across Ukraine, and of course he has wrought death and destruction on the soldiers that he has conscripted from Russia into that war, many of whom don't want to be fighting or losing their lives in his brutal, futile and unjustifiable war. His speech earlier this week is just frankly vile in its sort of epitomization, if that's a word, of what an autocrat and a dictator looks like. So there should be no doubt about his role in instigating this horrific war. But as Deputy Pringle said, understanding that fact and having to condemn it and calling on Putin to withdraw does not mean that the way to solve this terrible situation is for NATO, a military alliance that has its own bloody and brutal history, to seek to escalate that war, possibly to a terrifying conclusion. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, the people that was set up at the end of the Second World War, after the use by the United States, the only country that's ever used nuclear weapons, to blow Hiroshima and Nagasaki to pieces over 2 days, killing tens of thousands of people, set up a thing called the Doomsday Clock. And recently published their view that we were closer now to nuclear Armageddon and doomsday than we have ever been since the dropping of the Nagasaki and Hiroshima bombs. Now that is a terrifying thought. Closer even than the Cuban Missile Crisis is what they are suggesting, because of the big powers in the world believing they have the right to possess nuclear weapons and to escalate conflicts to the possible use of those weapons. Now, I believe, against that insane possibility of this absolutely horrific situation getting even worse, for Ireland not to use its position as a neutral country to urge de-escalation, to urge non-military solutions to the bloody invasion, is a terrible abdication of our role as a neutral country. And you see, I cannot understand the inconsistency in this regard, because if you were to take at face value the commitment of the proposers of the motion, or indeed most of the Western powers, that their interest in the Ukrainian war is purely to uphold the right to territorial integrity of Ukraine and their right to self-determination and to resist an unjust war, why do the same principles not apply to the Palestinian people, resisting an illegal occupation of their land? Why? Why is there no offers of military support from NATO to the Palestinians? Why? Could it have anything to do with somehow the illegal occupation of Palestinian territory is being done by an ally of the Western powers that is armed to the teeth by the United States? Is armed to the teeth by Britain and France? I wonder, has it anything to do with that? I wonder why some of the proposers of the motion were in government when the United States led the brutal invasion of Iraq in 2003 was the no motions asserting the right of the Iraqi people to resist the US invasion that led to 1 million deaths in that country. Had it got anything to do with the fact that the invaders were seen by allies by this country and Western powers? You see, that tells us there's a different agenda at work. So yes, solidarity with the Ukrainian people, but our voice as a neutral country should be to oppose military escalation and warmongering by all big powers.
Now we move to the regional group.